Hello and welcome to 10 with Ty. If you've ever thought about investing in commercial property, then today's episode is just for you. My guest is Helen Tarrant. She's the queen of commercial property, a buyer's agent who's closed over 1,000 commercial property deals. She knows the pros and cons, the pitfalls, and the massive potential. She wrote a book called Cashed Up with Commercial Property and is a co-author of this book with me, Secrets of Property Millionaires. In fact, our chapters are next to each other. Welcome to 10 with Ty, Helen.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Now, let's start from the beginning. You were doing a law degree and also running a couple of salons at the same time. Now, that's not a normal hop, skip, and a jump to become a commercial buyer's property agent. What was the progression? How did this happen?
Well, if you're Asian, that's pretty normal. And the only reason for that is there is a select handful of professions you can only go into. So it's like law is one of them. And I always had the saying to my parents. I always said that, you guys are really, really smart, because why have multiple children when you can have one child that fulfilled all your needs and dreams and hopes? I think the reason that I was became a beauty therapist was because my mother said to me, in Australia, everyone's really practical. You have to have a trade. And I was like, okay, so what do I do as a trade? And then Dad said, well, I never got to go to university. It's times. And, I was on the train one day and I saw this girl with all the law books and I thought, oh, her parents must be so proud of her.
Yeah, right.
And I thought, well, I better go to law school. So I had to go to law school and have a trade at the same time. So they didn't set the bar very high, did they?
But what made you want to invest in commercial property? What was the first step?
I went and did some residential education because, like all good Asian children, you knew you were going to have to help your parents retire, that you were their retirement plan. You were their entire retirement plan. And that freight train was coming whether you liked it or not. And when you're an only child, you could just see it coming. And whether you like it or not, you were going to have to be part of it. So I was trying to invest in residential, and my parents were one of those people that worked really, really hard. And then at 55 woke up and said, we didn't even know what retirement is.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is to illustrate how financial literate they were, how financial literate they were. Only maybe 6 months ago, when I was going away for a while, I gave Dad some money and said, look, Dad, put this money into your offset account. And he says to me, what's an offset account?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I was like, I can't believe you have a daughter like me who didn't know and you have no idea what an offset account is, right? So This is how financially literate my parents were. They knew how to work hard. They just didn't know how to make their money grow. And at 55, I couldn't see a way of getting them into retirement within 3 to 5 years. So I needed a solution. And I looked everywhere, and commercial property was that solution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what, you helped them buy you put the commercial property into their super fund, or how did that work?
I did, actually, after I did some of my own. So I challenged myself. So I went and bought a property in Sydney, in North Sydney, for $360,000. So that was my first property in 2012. And the reason I started that was because I worked in a salon. I was a beauty therapist. I knew I made rent every single week, no matter what happened. Right. And Bill, who was a dotty old owner of ours, would come in every week and collect rent from the hairdresser, from myself, from beauty therapist, from the apartment upstairs, and then he will go fishing. And I thought, well, his life is pretty good. So, what did you do, Bill? Oh, I bought this property. Originally was for my daughter. She decided not to continue as a hairdresser. I rented it out. This is his whole retirement plan. One building was his whole retirement plan. And I thought, hey, you know what? Maybe that's the way I can get my parents to retire. So I got into commercial property, started looking. There was no education, nothing. The only book I could read on commercial property was from Dolph DeRue, and that was about the US. And this was back in 2010. No, there was no education on commercial property. So it's there's no education on commercial property. But I kept looking, and I found this property in North Sydney, and it was $360,000, and it was an 8.6% yield. And I was like, something's wrong. Something's wrong, because residential, they teach you that, this is your gross, this is your negative, this is your break-even point. This is wrong. You're so positive cash flow. What is wrong with the deal? Right. And you don't know until you've done the deal. So I was just like, just do the deal. Right. Just do the deal. Who cares? Right. Just do the deal. Let's see if it works. Right. You got to give it a go. I'm always been the person, just give it a go. Jump out the plane. and then figure out the rest. You're either going to die or you're going to work out
Yeah.
on the way. So for me, I bought that property. That property delivered $20,000 in passive income every single year. For 9 years, we've held it, and we sold it for $1,050,000 after COVID. So that is the essence of commercial property. And once I started buying the first one, I thought, hey, you know what? I'm just going to challenge myself. I'm going to replace $50,000 of my income with passive income from equity that I've got from my residential property. Let's see if we can do it. So I did it. I went out, and for 12 months, I went and found 3 properties, bought it, and replaced $50,000 in passive income. That's after expenses, after mortgage, everything else. So I thought, okay, I can do it. Someone else can do it. Get the course, create a course, start teaching people how to do it. Because I started then noticing people making all these little mistakes. So 2016, became an educator, still the only educator on the market that gives free education and information on commercial property in droves, like, YouTube channels. People can shoot through hours of content, free webinars, all of this stuff, right, on commercial property. And became a buyer's agent in 2017 because just my clients said, well, help us buy some properties that you've been teaching us to do. And that's how the journey came about.
But I've actually my mother used to say to me, Ty, I've got a bone to pick with you. And I'd like to say that to you too, Helen. I've got a bone to pick with you because you've educated too many people. 8.6% yield. Last night on your webinar, you were showing that deals at 3.5%. Now, you've created too much competition. You should have been quiet so we could still get those good deals. Well, how do you respond to that, Helen?
Is absolutely the correct question, because I think all my competitors hate it when I have education, because I'm educating them to look for better deals than what they can present them. And I think that the market got ruined by residential investors coming in with a residential mindset. So I educated them. They understood, okay, we need to look for higher yields. But then they took back their residential mindset and they brought it into commercial and said, oh, okay, well, it's okay if the market's doing 7% and I will just pay 6.5% for that property. I'll pay a little bit more because ultimately it's going to grow in the back. It's going to go, right? So what ruined it was not the education, but the investors coming in and thinking, I can accept a lower yield because I've come from a growth background rather than a cash flow background. So as a result, when one buyer starts buying something at a lower return and a higher price, it starts to set a new benchmark. And then everybody else comes in and has to do that. And then you have to undercut the market again at 6%. So it actually started a bit of I think it's a residential push that started a bit of a waterfall effect. So I'm actually hoping that with more education, investors can take a stand and say, hey, you know what? I'm not paying 6% for that. The right yield is 6.5%. And I'm only going to pay 6.5%. I believe that if there's enough investors who say, I'm not going to pay 6% in this area, then we can actually work towards bringing the yields back up in commercial property.
What I don't get, last night you were showing some deals of childcare centres on this webinar at 3.5% yield. Why would you buy a commercial property on a 3.5% yield? I know they had a long lease, and I know there's great depreciation on commercial property, but still, I think I look at that and go, well, I'll just put my money in a Commonwealth Bank CMT account and get 5%. Why would I take the risk at 3.5%?
Full growth and wealth preservation. So one of the things about commercial property, if you look at the history of commercial property, where it came from, is that most people use commercial property as wealth preservation and generational wealth. So my question to you is, if you were going to pass on in 20 years time, 30, and hopefully you don't, but say 50 years time, would you rather leave your child with a property that is negative or gives them 2% return on every million, or would you like to leave your children with a property that gives them 6 to 8% return on every million? And that's the key question, 6 to 8%. But that requires you, but knowing also when you pass on that property will last a lifetime of your children. That it's not going to have a vacancy, it's not going to have that volatility where your child is forced to sell, that you're essentially passing on guaranteed income and retirement to your children for the span of their lifetime.
But I could pass on that $1 million at 5% in the CMT account.
But your children could also go and spend that tomorrow. But the childcare, they wouldn't. Just
All right. Let's switch gears. On this webinar last night, it was pretty fascinating. You're pumped for this year for commercial property. You're saying a 20% increase. You're predicting a 20% increase over the next 12 months. What are you seeing out there? Why are you saying that?
there isn't enough returns in the market, full stop, in investments right now. But commercial offers the one single thing that investors are looking for, that I believe that we're faced with aging investors. So investors coming into the market aren't 20, 30-year-olds at the moment, right? They are coming in, but not in the same drove they did back 10 years ago. Back 10 years ago, the drove of people coming in that was a lot more. Now there's less. Most investors are now in their mid-30s to that mid-50s range, right? So what happens in that range is you can't afford negative gearing. Like you really are. You want to increase your portfolio, your wealth, but you can't afford to be negative. What you need to do is build a portfolio that is self-sustaining. And commercial property offers you a portfolio from day one that is self-sustaining. And that's why the residential investors who've spent 10, 20 years building a portfolio now has equity is going to shift gears into commercial and buy self-sustaining portfolios. Now, one of the other really, really interesting things that's happened in this market that people haven't seen, and I'm willing to bet on this, and I will have this conversation 2 to 3 years' time, is commercial property hasn't even gone nuts yet, right? Right now, we're seeing the next level from the early adopters. The early adopters came in 2016 to 2019. That's where the early adopters comes in, right? During COVID, people came in, but they came in at like the gold rush. They kind of go, oh, it was good, let's just buy something, right? They didn't know, right? Now we're seeing serious investors who are going, okay, we're early stages, we're going to be buying in, we're strategically buying in. Now, these investors are going to see the next 2 to 3 years that commercial property is going to have better capital growth than residential. Once that's been established and there's transparency, the floodgates are going to open and people are going to be throwing themselves into commercial property. And because what's happened is last 10 years, we've had no transparency. The problem with commercial property is there's no transparency. You can't tell a listing that they're listing a property for $5 million. And you look at Google history or RP data or whatever, you go, 2 years ago, that property was 2 mil. How did it become 5 mil? You had no idea that during the time they got a new tenant, they gutted the premise, they did all sorts of things, and now it's worth 5 mil. There's no idea why and how. You can't track capital growth. The other myth in the market is also that during COVID and all of the economic conditions, people was going to do fire sales of commercial property. And all of these high interest rates were going to be putting pressure and people were going to liquidate. It didn't happen. We've had 3 rounds of it. It didn't happen. The market will show in the next 2 years or 3 years is the stability of commercial property, but the capital growth that commercial property has will continue to demonstrate that will outstrip residential, will now create a frenzy even more in the next few years. So this is a great buying opportunity.